From the movie's questionable reception to a pretty horrible score. Looks like David F. Sandberg got some thoughts about Shazam 2. So let's take a look at how Shazam 2's director reacted to the box office flop. Now, it's no surprise that the new Sandberg movie was average at best. The director finally decided to face up to the criticism that the movie's facing, and it all started with many people calling Shazam 2 a flop.
Years have passed, and I grow weak.
One Reddit user even tagged the director in a post about Shazam, Fury of the Gods' low box office numbers, and that's when Sandberg responded in a Reddit post. He talked about how he really felt about the movie's poor performance, and it looks like he agrees.
Big score. 2,000 students, you might think, wow, so many strangers. Well, not if you think of them as possible future friends, then, wow, so many friends. The principal, her name's Shirley. She's the best.
What's more, it didn't really come as a surprise to him, and he was just glad that he got paid for the work he did up front. You see, most fans aren't too shocked by Shazam, just like David F. Sandberg. Even if it didn't go well, he probably doesn't want to term it a flop. It's not just about Shazam, though. Most comic book movies aren't doing so great at the box office lately, but I still didn't expect this movie to do worse than another recent flop, because Shazam 2 did even worse at the box office than Ant-Man Quantumania. You see, the sequel's first weekend was one of the worst of the DC period. And get this, the second weekend was even worse than that. The DC sequel saw the third worst decrease from one week to the next. And this was behind Batman vs. Superman and the Suicide Squad. Sure, Batman vs. Superman was already falling from a much higher start, and the Suicide Squad was available on HBO Max at the same time. But to better understand why the sequel didn't do so great, it's best to look at the numbers. So, let's get down to some math and start with the box office statistics.
All right. Hey, yo, back!
Now, picture this. Shazam! Fury of the Gods made $102.4 million in its second weekend of release. This included $46.3 million from the US and $56.1 million internationally. That's where it's been distributed in most major regions except for France. It may have passed $100 million, but it's unlikely to reach $200 million. In the US, it only made $9.7 million in its second weekend. That was less than half of what John Wick 4 made in its first weekend. At present, Shazam 2 is now the third highest grossing movie in the DC Extended Universe, which makes Wonder Woman 1984 and The Suicide Squad ahead of it. Sure, it may pass those two, but it isn't a sure thing if it drops in the second weekend is part of what's to come. Obviously, the reviews are a good place to start to understand why it didn't do well at the box office.
Still can't fly.
Forget flying, man. We just made 73 bucks.
73 bucks? Come on! Hey, wait a minute. I just got an idea.
And it's pretty obvious when you compare the sequel to the first movie. You see, the first movie has a 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, while the second one only has a 51% rating. At least it's not the worst, which is the case with Suicide Squad, and that movie only has a 26% rating. The team behind the movie has gone on a charm offensive. They started claiming that it's really a pretty nice movie and pointing out that 87% of people liked it. But the reality is that people haven't come to see it. Shazam fans may have gone to see the movie during its opening weekend, but the drop-off shows that they didn't come back for more.
I'd like to purchase some of your finest beer, please.
The movie's mixed reviews may have also turned off blockbuster fans and others who don't usually go to comic book movies. However, it's not just about the movie being bad though. It just came out on the wrong platform. Most consumers are smart enough to know that they won't have to wait long. Obviously, Shazam 2 will definitely be available on a streaming platform in the near future. In fact, there are rumors that Shazam 2 will be on home video around the middle of April. But even though the first movie was very good, it only made $363.6 million at the box office, which didn't exactly put it very high on DC's list. Like, even the badly reviewed Black Adam made more. Now, add this plus the fact that critics didn't like the sequel was a bad sign. It's obvious that Warner Brothers knew that too. That's why they threw in Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman in the sequel. Wonder Woman couldn't change the situation though, and even if the sequel doesn't wind up being the lowest grossing movie in the DC Extended Universe, it seems doubtful that Shazam 3 will ever be made. Some DC supporters would think that was always going to be the case. Before the second movie came out, James Gunn and Peter Safran's new DC Age was coming up. People think of it as a soft reboot, but they never ruled out bringing back old characters. If Shazam 2 had done better, Zachary Levi might have played the part again, either in a third movie or as a cameo or supporting character in a fourth. You may say that this big transition at DC affected the sequel, but to be honest, I don't think so. Cause even though the Joker and the Batman had nothing to do with the main DC continuity, a lot of DC fans still went to see them. But a movie adding to the backstory doesn't have much of a success rate either. As if to prove the case, Marvel's Ant-Man 3 very much did nothing but build up what was to come in the MCU. Still, it only made $464.8 million at the box office. Although I imagine Shazam 2 would have been very happy to be a disappointment at such numbers.
Yes. And obviously we're gonna have to be making this purchase anonymously.
Obviously, fans are probably dying to see a good DC movie for once, and don't care whether anything changes the future of a series or not. But still, what if The Flash or Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom don't perform as well at the box office as Shazam 2 did? I guess we'll be able to figure out whether it was the larger changes at DC that hurt its prospects. But for now, it seems like the DC sequel didn't do well at the box office, mainly because nobody looked up the reviews before going and just blindly trusted the franchise to deliver. However, there were two main reasons behind the movie's flop status though. As I already mentioned, the movie didn't get good reviews, and the project got a rotten score. This is the same thing that happened to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania on the MCU side of the business. More common though are two things that have nothing to do with the quality of the project. For one thing, the marketing wasn't exactly the best it's been for the franchise. Most people probably didn't know that the character was going to be in another movie this month, but perhaps the most essential thing to talk about here is James Gunn's huge relaunch of the DCU. Many people think that the past several DCEU movies don't seem important because of how big its shadow is. As you can expect, this will very probably affect how well every other DCEU project coming out this year does. This is sad because it implies that Shazam, played by Zachary Levi, still has a major question mark over his destiny. But still, I hope that Gunn can tell us anything shortly about what'll happen to the hero up next. After all, everyone's got pretty high hopes for him. And there you have it. That's all for how the Shazam 2 director reacted to the box office flop.